If you'd like to learn whether the Rock Retirement Club could be an important piece of your retirement puzzle, come hang out with me on Thursday, July 15th at 7 p.m., and I'll share a little bit about the club, answer your questions, and we can just talk about rock and retirement. Learn more at livewithroger.com. Do you want to have the confidence to truly rock retirement? Well, I'm going to show you how on the Retirement Answer Man Show. One of my favorite TV series right now is Ted Lasso, which is on Apple Plus TV. So the premise of the show is that you have this successful second-tier American football coach who is really a motivator, rah-rah kind of guy, played by Jason Sudeikis, I believe, from who I like as an actor. And he gets hired to go over and coach Premier Soccer in England. The problem is he doesn't know anything about soccer. I mean, nothing about soccer. So it's the show goes through the adventure of him going to England and having to figure out soccer and interact with a very different culture. It's really warm show. Now, a little bit of warning is there's a lot of colorful language in it that if you're not comfortable with that, you might not get it. We think our mother-in-law would enjoy it. So my wife suggested it to her and she couldn't get past some of the crude language in it. So just a warning there, but if you can get past that and doesn't bother you, it's really a warm show. I've watched it 3 times now. And there's a scene in one of the episodes where a football player, Sam, makes some mistakes on the field and he's coming off the field and he's beating himself up about it. And I was sort of paralyzed because he's so upset with himself. And Ted Lasso, the coach, goes up to him and says, "Hey, Sam, you know what the happiest animal on earth is? It's a goldfish. You know why? Got a 10-second memory. Be a goldfish, Sam." A lot of great little quotes like that. Just be a goldfish. And I've been using that lately. When I get a little hard on myself, just be a goldfish. Maybe you should be a goldfish in times as well. Hey, I'm Roger Whitney. I am the host of the show. I'm glad you're here. This is June, just answering a lot of your questions and talking about retirement. Next month, we're going to get back into our monthly themes and starting July with withdrawal strategies, understanding the different withdrawal strategies so you can find one that matches you. And then our theme for August is going to be all about women in retirement. And we're going to have Tanya Nichols come on the show for the month. And we're going to talk through some of the issues or wrinkles that there are for women in retirement. But with that, let's go talk about a retirement lifestyle framework. There are different approaches to planning for retirement. And I think this one thing we always got to remember is nobody knows how to do this. So the key is to find a framework and a perspective that you agree with. So one framework that I see a lot is obviously the 4% withdrawal rule. And I was having a conversation via email with somebody in the Rock Retirement Club who was making suggestions for the course. And essentially he commented, I'm just paraphrasing here, is I'm not getting this, is what he was saying. I wish it would approach it a different way. And what he would prefer is that it focus on what is the maximum amount of lifestyle I could have given the assets that I have. What's the maximum amount I could spend rather than building it up from the ground up, which is what I'm going to talk about. And I understand his perspective. And although I don't agree with it from a planning process point of view, trying to figure out what's the maximum I could spend, it's not as easy as you think. Obviously you have inflation and you have the time frame, but there's a sequence or a rhythm of spending that is unique to every individual. So if you were to figure out the maximum you could spend based off of a given level of assets, probably what you're going to come up with is, based on my assets, I could spend $200,000 a year, inflation adjusted, for the rest of my life. You're going to come to a number that you could spend, right? Well, the problem with that is that one of the assumptions in there is that if you come to, you could spend $200,000 and you inflate that every year for the rest of your life. Well, that means when you're 85, 90 years old, you're going to be spending $200,000 inflation adjusted. Life doesn't work that way. So to get to that number, usually what we do is we get to that number and then we think that's going to be our lifestyle today. And we're making the unspoken assumption that we're never going to age. Our life is never going to have a different rhythm and it's always going to be the same, which isn't the case. And that's one reason why I don't like using that approach. Although I understand the desire to have it, I prefer to build what I like to call the retirement lifestyle design framework. Otherwise, I think we can think wrong about money during this retirement phase of life, because it's very easy to say, I just need a lot of money, and just try to continue working and continue sacrificing just to preserve and grow a huge pile so I'm okay. Or you can have the other approach, I don't need much money at all to live on, and then define your life that way. And that makes it too simple. I think a better question than how much do I need, and questions are really important, the questions you ask are really important, is how much do I need for this lifestyle, for the lifestyle that I believe that I want? I think that's a really important question and framework that you want to go about it. And that's how we approach it in the class in the club, which is an on-demand class that you can take at your own pace. Because if you don't have a framework like that, it's really easy to grab onto something randomly and let that drive all your decision-making. It could be, what's the maximum spending I could have? You could just grab onto that, and that's going to drive all your decision-making. Because once you figure out that number, now you start to create these decision trees that are predicated on that decision. It could be, sometimes we latch on to, I just need the lake house, or more is better. Sometimes we can just latch on to these simplistic things that don't really get us to where we want to be from a life perspective. Or we could grab on to, I just need the right investment strategy, and then everything else will work. And I think we do this because it feels complicated. And when it feels, the mind doesn't like complicated things. Scientifically, it takes more energy to think on complicated things. As a Homo sapien, we're trying to conserve energy because internally we just want to survive. So the brain looks for ways to simplify things to save energy. And sometimes we're going to latch on to these things just for simplicity. Sometimes we're going to latch on to something because of anxiety, right? Because of anxiety, I'm just going to latch on to, I just need a lot more money. I just need more. Or we're going to latch on to a desire of what's the maximum amount I can spend, or the lake house. And I think that's a little bit disorganized in how you think. And I'm actually adopting some of this from Cal Newport, who talks about this from the other end of the spectrum to recent graduates about how to figure out what you want to do in life. Rather than trying to figure out what your passion is or what your job will be, his suggestion is, why don't you think forward of how you want your life to be, and then you can back into careers that would support that life. I remember long ago, I was listening to Dr. Laura. Remember her? And she was talking about a gentleman she was dating in college, in medical school. And part of the reason they didn't get married, I'm sure there were other reasons, was she looked at her life and she projected forward and said, I don't want to live with a spouse that's going to have the demands of the career that my then boyfriend is headed towards. And so that was factored into her decision not to be married to that man. Now, I'm sure there are other reasons, but I think that same perspective can be applied here of, in an organized way, start to think about where you want your life to be 3 to 5 years from now, and start to use that to create your spending plan in order to marshal your resources, your money, to help secure that it can happen. This is a lot of what my wife and I are doing while we're here in Colorado, is we're talking about where do we want to be 3 to 5 years from now? And this gives you a little bit more organized way of approaching the subject. So you can determine, one, what location do you want to be in? Do you want to be in New York? Do you want to be in Mississippi? Do you want to live in Europe? Do you want 2 houses? Start to define the location where you are going to be happiest in retirement. I see this all the time in the club, and I see it in my private practice. People moving to Florida, people moving from California to closer to their family in Texas, all those types of things. So first off, where do you see yourself wanting to be? Because that's going to help define a lot of the atmosphere, isn't it? And once you've started to frame that together, well, first off, that's what my wife and I are doing. We're in Colorado because we're thinking this might be where we want to be now that we're empty nesters. And so we're meeting with a realtor and touring and getting a feel to sort of try it on a little bit. So once you sort of have some vision together on your location, what kind of activities do you want to do? Travel? Is it giving? Is it golf club? Is it lake house? Is it nice cars, etc.? What are the things that you want to be doing? Like if it's travel, perhaps you want to be near a hub of an airport. If it's hiking and cycling, then that might lead you more towards, say, Colorado. Or if it's boating, it might lead you more to Arkansas or to Florida or coastal living. Start to think of the activities that you want to surround yourself with, because that's going to help build your society. So you get your location, the macro atmosphere, and then the activities, which will help define that a little bit more. And then you can put numbers to those things. And then lastly, you can look at the resources you have to decide and determine whether you can confidently achieve those lifestyle choices and activities with the resources that you have. And the goal here is to create what we call a plan of record that gives you those things. It gives you the location you want to be in, the activities and surroundings that you want, and confidence that you have the resources to actually pay for it. And oftentimes what happens is there's a push and pull that comes between these three things, right? Well, let's say you want to have a lake house and a mountain house. It's okay to think of that off the top at first, but as you frame all this together, you may realize, oh, I don't quite have the resources for that. So there's a push and pull between all of these things, which essentially is you negotiating with yourself. And we teach you how to do that in the master class to get to a balance, because generally you can't have everything. I think this is a much more organized way of thinking about your life after work than your withdrawal rate or what's the maximum spending amount, etc. And here's the thing. You're not going to get it right because you're ever changing. You don't know what you don't know. But because you've done this in an organized way, as you start to walk life and you start to gain more clarity on some things and you eliminate other things, you're going to be in a much better position to iterate and make adjustments along the way. And that's the key to rockin' retirement. So with that, let's move on to some of your questions. We absolutely love getting your questions and trying to answer them on the show. And we love to get your feedback on the show, a suggestion, a tip that we can share with others. So if you have any of those, you have a question that you'd like to have addressed on the show, go to rogerwhitney.com/Ask Roger. And you can leave your question. So our first question comes from Libby on the sourcing of their withdrawal strategy. First off, she says, loves the show and the resources, which is awesome. Thank you, Libby. And she gives me a lot of background, but her essential question is where to pull money for the retirement paycheck from when they retire. Should they start pulling from their retirement accounts to help reduce their RMDs, or is there some other strategy? Which is a really important question. And I would put this into the tactical phase of retirement planning. We have first, you get a feasible plan, then you get a resilient plan. Then the tactical plan is, okay, where do I get the money from once I've figured this out? So I'm going to assume you know how much you need from your financial assets, Libby, before you get to this point. And this is an important question because traditional planning is you drain your after-tax accounts, the monies that you've already paid taxes on, and then you look towards your Roth assets because you're going to delay taxes, and then your tax-deferred assets. And that's not really a very efficient way of doing it all the time. So the first thing I would do is determine how much you need from your financial assets, let's say over the next 5 or 10 years. So you spend $100,000 a year, you have $50,000 in income. So you're going to need $50,000 from your money, from your investment assets. Then what I would suggest that you do when you're looking at, do I take from retirement accounts, is to first estimate, well, what are my required minimum distributions going to be if I don't touch these retirement accounts? So you get an idea of what the income you're going to have to receive when you start your required minimum distribution. So let's project what those are going to be. And that's not too difficult to do. You take the balance of your pre-tax accounts, your 401ks and IRAs, in your age today, and you project using, let's just say, a 5% return between now and when you're age 72. And then you can go to the IRS and get the IRS RMD tables as they are today and just project what percentage of your assets you're going to have to take out. I think at 72, it's around 3.7%, but we'll put a link to a RMD calculator in our 6-Shot Saturday just to make it easy for you. But if you do that first and you assume you don't touch your retirement assets, you assume they grow by 5%, you can get an idea of how much money you're going to have to take out if you don't touch your IRA assets. So that will be good to know, because your RMD may not be as big as you think it is, or it may be something you need to deal with. Now, once you do that, you can look at your 5-year income estimate, which I like to do in my practice, and we suggest you do in the course in the club, is you want to say, okay, over the next 5 years from the year that you retire, what income are you going to have each year? And that's going to help you start to forecast what your tax brackets are going to be. Because it may be, Libby, that in year 2 of retirement, you're going to have no income to speak of. And if you need $50,000, you may be able to pull that $50,000 from, say, your IRA and only pay the 12% tax at the 12% tax rate and lower your future RMDs. You can compare that to taking money from after-tax assets and potentially doing a Roth conversion. So the key here is a multi-year tax bracket planning to help you figure out where you pull for this retirement paycheck. And so that's a very rough framework, and maybe we'll build that out in future episodes. Hopefully that's helpful, Libby. Our next question comes from Jeff on cash, debt, and retirement.
Hi, Roger. I have $100,000 in the bank, and I owe $190,000 on my mortgage on my home. I want to retire in July of 2022. Any suggestions on what I should do? Keep the cash or pay down the mortgage? Thanks.
Hey, Jeff, it's a really good question. Do you start to get to a point where you can be debt-free sooner than later by using this cash in the bank, which is probably earning next to nothing, to pay off a mortgage, which will help you, one, not pay as much interest and get you closer to having it paid off? It's very common to think of these decisions by themselves. We look at our bank statement, we see that, wow, I'm not really getting interest. You look at your mortgage statement, you have this debt that you would like to have gone, plus you're paying more interest. And you start to frame the issue from that point forward. And that's how we usually start, right? There's a pressure point of something we're trying to figure out, and we focus on that one issue. And my suggestion, Jeff, for you is to put that aside first and really get everything organized and have a framework for how you're going to retire May of next year. And then once you have that in place with your current scenario of the 190 in debt with the money in cash, once you have a feasible plan to retire in your current situation, then you can create a what if scenario, which would show, what if I took this $100,000 and put it towards this debt, right? On the negative, you would lose that liquidity because that money went to the debt and you'd still have your mortgage payment. But in your model, you would become debt-free a lot quicker, which means the payment would go away. And you can look at it, but you'll be able to see it from the most important thing of you being able to retire. And so that is going to follow a process where you build a plan where you say, okay, I have a feasible plan to live this kind of lifestyle. How do I make it more resilient? And that's where you can test, do you use the $100K to pay off the mortgage? Just from the facts that you gave me, first off, that is what I would recommend that you do, is get more organized and know what your pension is or what your Social Security is, how much you need to spend, what all of your resources are, and have a plan of record, because that will get you to your decision. Now, based on what you told me, you want to be a little careful if this $100,000 represents all of your after-tax liquidity, meaning that you don't have any other investments or monies outside of an IRA or 401k. Because if you take this $100,000 and you move it to your mortgage, which would still have a $90,000 balance on it, you've done a couple of things. Yeah, you've decreased the amount of interest you're going to pay on your mortgage, but you still got your payment. And you could easily zap all of your after-tax liquidity. So if life happens and you need more money than you expect, maybe you have to retire earlier, now you may have to tap your pre-tax account sooner. And it doesn't really put you in a lot better position from a liquidity and cash flow standpoint. It zaps all your liquidity and you still got this payment that you have to make. So I would be a little careful on just taking that money and paying the mortgage off, at least right now. Part of that is also that you're about to come up to a major life change. You're planning this for about a year from now. Having a lot of liquidity gives you a lot of options. And it's good to have a lot of options when you're going through a major life change, because that gives you flexibility to navigate it. If you took this $100,000 and this really represents your cash reserve and you put it towards the mortgage, you've lost that ability to easily absorb shocks or take advantage of potential opportunities because you don't have the money. It's all put towards a mortgage, which really hasn't retired the mortgage. Sure, you could do a HELOC or a home equity line of credit or something like that, but that gets you into debt a little bit again. It might be a little bit different if you were paying off the mortgage, but I would be very careful about lowering and getting rid of all your liquidity right before a major life change, because the practical matter is it might make more sense to hold on to the money, get through your retirement and be retired and figure out your plan of record and then make the decision once you've already reached the other side. But I would start in an organized fashion so you could compare what happens if I did pay it off or pay it down and what happens if I don't, and see how you compare side by side. Our next question comes from Susie about whether they're on track. Susie says, "Hey, Roger, my husband is 68. I'm 58. He wants to retire very soon, and we've made a very basic spreadsheet to see if we're financially ready. We added up our pension, Social Security, and assumed a 3% of our total retirement investment accounts for our income. So basically a 3% withdrawal rate. We haven't dialed in the different aspects of our pie cake yet, but do you think a 3% average return on our investments is a good, rough, conservative number for now to account for ups and downs and inflation, etc. for our spending? We look forward to spending each month. And our spending includes about $2,000 each month for big stuff. So that sounds like it's a little bit of a cushion there, Susie. We live simply or debt-free, but look forward to our home projects and traveling." So Susie, I think you're on track. There's definitely things you want to flesh out because your pension, it may not be inflation adjusted. I think you do want to build a pie cake structure or a bucket type of structure. Is 3% average return on investments good for conservative? I don't know what you mean by conservative. I think 3% is not overly aggressive, even as a withdrawal rate, but I still think there's work to be done to flush it out. We show you examples in the Retirement Plan Live episodes and in the masterclass. I don't know if you're in the RRC or not. You can go through and build a household balance sheet because I think you want to figure out the rhythms of spending. You say that you include $2,000 each month for quote unquote big stuff. So I'm assuming that's discretionary spending. And that's a pretty healthy cushion for that. But I do think that you're on track for getting to your decision. And I just encourage you to flush it out a little bit more and build a cash flow model that you can use to make decisions on. And that's really the key here, because you're not really going to figure it out, Susie. You just want to have a working model that you can keep tweaking as you learn what your spending actually is, what your investment experience actually is. And then you're going to be in a much better position to make little adjustments as life unfolds. And with that, let's go set a SMART sprint.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to take a little baby step that you can do over the next 7 days to not just rock retirement, but rock life. So again, I'm going to encourage you to go outside. It's June. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. And I'm going to encourage you, if you're single, go take a walk with purpose. If you're married, go take a walk with purpose and start talking very casually about what you want out of life over the next 3 to 5 years. It could be financially, what your dreams are. But the reason I want you to do this on your walk is because walking meetings, either with yourself or with someone else, are very productive. There's something about the movement. You have the rhythm of walking, you're in nature, you have things to distract you to look around, and you hear the noises of the birds or the trees or the highway or whatever it is. But there's something about a walking meeting that is casual and comfortable, and that sets yourself up to think a little bit more expansive. And if you're walking with a partner, it sets yourself up to have more relaxed conversations, which can be much healthier than if you're sitting across the kitchen table or the conference table. Steve Jobs, in his career, I'm reading a book right now called Becoming Steve Jobs, a biography of him, which is really great, by the way. And he used to do a lot of walking meetings, a lot, I think, for this. It creates that mental space to feel comfortable. So go do that. We're here almost to the end of June. We got about one more week here in Colorado, and then we head back home. I hope you're having a wonderful week, and we'll talk again in 7 days. Hey, it's time for that all-important disclaimer. We so appreciate you listening to the show and love your questions and love the teaching that we're able to provide here. And actually, it helps us too. But remember, you're not our clients.
Not love it if you took advice from us on the show.
We would not love it if you took advice from us on the show. Realize this is helpful in education. Talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor before you make any decisions.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.